Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. And if you've been listening to the show, you know I've been talking about this head cold that I have as I recorded episodes on June 19th. And today is the last of those episodes. So hopefully next week when I record, no more head cold and I can talk a little bit more. But before we get into the show, a couple things. One, I haven't talked about it much, but I have a podcast called the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. If you're into oil and gas and you would like to find out more about what's going on in Texas, please check us out. We have on myself and Josh Shelton host it week to week, and then we have on guests like Sergio Chapa from the San Antonio Business Journal, who wrote about us in the article about the Global Energy Leaders Podcast a few months back, and also David Blackman, who's been on this show a couple times. So Texas Oil and Gas Podcast is where you can find that out. Also, David Blackman and I are getting ready to launch another podcast, oil and gas related, and we'll have information about that soon. Today's episode, we have on Nathan Berg. Okay, so here's a way that you, if you're a producer, if you're a driller, if you're in that business, you can save some money right now. So be sure to check out their website. We'll link to it in the show notes. Without further ado, Nathan Berg. Well, Nathan, it's been a while since I've actually got to see you. I hope all's well since we've last talked, and thanks for being on the show today.
No, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, let's kind of set the table for the audience. You're kind of people say, I've been doing this since I was knee-high. Well, you've been in the oil and gas business for quite a while now.
Yeah, I mean, technically, growing up on the farm in Kansas, I guess as a young boy, we operated on oil wells, so technically since then. But I graduated college in petroleum engineering from the University of Kansas in 2007, so technically went to work in the field full-time after that, and went to work for Chesapeake Energy, mainly in the field on the drilling side as a drilling consultant and drilling foreman, and worked for them for about 5 years, and then went to a smaller operator up in Tulsa, Bluestone Natural Resources, and worked for them for another 5 years. And that's where we really designed this LCM Recovery Unit, was while I was working for Bluestone Natural Resources.
Well, yeah, maybe you didn't get paid those early days, but it seems like it kind of set the tone for your life and your career, just to kind of get experience that. I'm sure as a young boy that was quite a sight to see, drilling wells and being around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was fun. My grandfather, he actually got struck by lightning pulling one of the wells on our farm.
Oh, wow.
And he survived, and it was something to talk about, that's for sure. But it was fun. I'd climb up on the tanks, check the wells almost every day, and we had open top tanks up there, and just seeing the oil pump in the salt water, it was just captivating to me. And it definitely set the stage. I always liked math. I always liked science. I definitely wanted to be an engineer, and it definitely took me into the direction of petroleum.
Right. Now, let's kind of set the table. Right now, as everyone knows, oil is, I don't know how to describe it. We're not in the downturn anymore, per se. We've kind of leveled off, but we're not at $100. So it's, prices, it's not great, but it's okay for some regions, and other regions are struggling. And what you've guys done, you've kind of worked your whole life as you said, as a drilling petroleum engineer, and now you've kind of come along and said, hey, there's a way to probably help producers to do a more safer and more efficient job. And so what did you guys come up with, and what was kind of the inspiration for what y'all did?
Yeah, so, prices are stagnant right now, but one thing, the country as a whole and really the industry and worldwide has been able to do is find ways around it. And throughout the years, we've kind of evolved in lots of various ways. And this unit, what we developed was something that a challenge we were facing. And the field specifically of East Texas that we were drilling in, losses were severe. Everybody was trying to get away from oil-based mud. At the time we designed this unit, around 2010, 2011 for the prototype, oil-based mud and diesel prices were much higher. Oil-based mud was $150 a barrel plus. And so getting away from that was, at the time, seemingly crucial. Yet everybody's tried alcohol muds, exotic freshwater muds, brine polymers in the area we were drilling, and the clays and the shales, they're just, even with max inhibition, they still heave on you and swell. And so oil-based mud is really the only solution, but you have to bite the bullet and take the losses. So there's systems that have come out to date to recover that lost circulation material, but we needed something simpler, something a little more cost effective. And so as I was driving home from the field, actually, back to Tulsa one day, I called my partner who was setting the rig, and I said, why don't we just come up with this unit and build a huge sluice box, if you will. I don't know if you're familiar with gold panning.
Why don't you kind of break down some of these terms for some of our listeners who may not be directly in oil and gas, oil-based mud, what the importance of the mud is, and kind of maybe for a 30,000 foot for folks who aren't directly involved with oil and gas on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're drilling mud, obviously it touches the formation and it reacts with it. And if you have typically clays and the shales that absorb any of that fluid, they'll react in different ways. And the field that we were in, oil-based mud, we were using what's called an 80-20 system. It's 80% diesel, 20% water. And basically the diesel encapsulates the water. You can use up to 100% diesel, but the specific system that is, I would say, probably the most popular in industry is the 80-20 system, and that's what we were using. So 80% of your mud is diesel, and at that point in time, diesel prices were in the range of $3 a gallon, if not more, even for off-road diesel. And as you can imagine, 42 gallons for a barrel, it really starts to add up. Like I said, the price for our mud was, over $150 a barrel at times. So going to something else seemed like a good idea, but we just couldn't afford to do it. There's cases where you just lose the entire wellbore and you'd have to sidetrack and start all over. And that's true in many basins across the world. People don't always want to use oil base. The other downfall of oil base is the environmental hazards. You have cleanup. If you have a spill on location, obviously the chlorides are over 3,000 parts per million. It has 80% or more diesel in it. As you can imagine, it's not an environmentally friendly solution. However, it is a very good mud system. And so part of what we were just trying to do is say, hey, we've got to use oil base, but we can't stand the losses. We don't want to lose a bunch of this mud downhole to the formation, so we've got to find a way to stop the losses. And part of that was recovering some of this lost circulation material and using it again.
Okay, so let me just kind of make sure I'm recapping this right, and just kind of for the audience here. The issue at hand, and as we've gone through the downturn, one of the things that the debate has gone on is, what is break-even price, and technology and labor force costs all plays into that. And so what you're saying is even before the downturn, actually, the diesel was high, it's expensive, and so you had to use an oil-based mud, and you're going to lose a percentage of that mud, and that compounds over and over and over again. And so what you did was come in and invented a system that kind of gets back a certain percentage of that, and also helps protect the environment. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it recovers the lost circulation material. I mean, inevitably, you're still using the same oil-based mud, so it doesn't really change that aspect of it. But you're just recovering the material in the mud, the lost circulation material, which has been something that has been attempted before. And there's various systems that have tried to do it. It's just nothing was super efficient and easy at our disposal. And, you made mention, yes, prices were much higher than as far as diesel is concerned in oil-based mud, and that is true. However, I will say just about every field in the world has a break-even cost at some point, whether it's the land price to negotiate, to get the leases or whatever the case may be. The operations may be high. You have to run so many strings of casing to get there. Every field has its challenges, and it could be offshore, it could be onshore. And so you have a break-even cost, and once you get that break-even cost, sometimes the price you get for oil and gas, we can't control the market. And so you have to adapt, you have to change, and you have to kind of evolve and learn to work around it. And that's what we were trying to do. We had a break-even cost. And we saw, okay, we've got to adapt. We've got to shut these losses off. I mean, there was operators around us in the area that lost tens of thousands of barrels. It sounds crazy, but a few did. And at $150 a barrel, that might be a $5 million mud bill on a 10 to 15,000 foot well. And it doesn't take too many people to realize that's not going to work. You're not going to have a payout. So there's various break-even costs. For us, we needed to get our mud costs down. We needed to get our losses under control, and this LCM Recovery Unit actually enabled us to do that.
We'll link to the website, smartdrillingsolutions.com, where you have a video that kind of explains it. Why don't you kind of break down what has historically been done and then what your system does differently?
So historically, there's really been two ways to recover lost circulation material, which is, Lost circulation material could be defined as a lot of things. There's fines such as carbs. There's chewed up cedar fiber. In western Oklahoma, panhandle of Texas, where losses are severe, I've had mint from Denver that's been ground up and pumped down whole. I've had tires. I mean, you could pump anything to try to, and what you're trying to do is effectively fill the pores down hole in the rock, and that way your mud can't seep into it anymore. And that way you can get the mud back to surface, reuse it, and also keep the well under control. You can imagine if you're losing all that mud on the backside, you're losing hydrostatic pressure, and the well could blow out, collapse. It could do various different things. It could heave on you. So to date, I would say the two systems that are the most popular, one is a multi-panel deck shaker, and it basically just has different decks of different size screens, starting with coarse and working finer, vice versa. And so you'll have these different layers where cuttings as well as lost circulation material comes out and off the decks at different points in time. So the two downfalls with those systems were, one, you have to run a ton of screens. Two, you're only recovering a certain number and a certain particle size off of each deck. Everything else is still getting discarded or dumped into the pits. So those, I would say, I've used those before, and they just are not super efficient, especially a lot of times operators these days will run lost circulation material of different sizes. So they're going to run a blend. It's not just going to be cedar fiber. It's going to be chewed up cedar fiber plus ground up cottonseed hulls, super fine rubber, super fine mica, whatever you have it. It's going to be a variation of different things of mainly different particle sizes. So it's tough to recover that if you're going that route. The other thing that's been tried is it's kind of like a bead recovery unit. It sets at the end of the shakers, and it just takes everything off the shakers and recovers it. The problem with that is you get a lot of cuttings, and depending on the type of bit you're using, whether it's a PDC, a roller cone, an impregnated bit, the cuttings might mimic your LCM. And so to separate those cuttings from the LCM can be a challenge. And so, like I said, as I was driving home, I was like, what are we going to do to recover it more efficiently, but be super simple that we can use in the middle of the well when we need it? And one of the things I thought of went back to some gold panning that some friends of mine had done and some different devices. I mean, everybody's pretty familiar with a gold panning sluice box. And what a sluice box does is it just works like a cascade effect. You dump the water into it, obviously with the gold, the rocks, and the cuttings, and the dense rocks and gold, if you're painting for gold, falls out at different compartments and chambers just because of the density difference. And all the lighter fluid, the water itself, plus the lighter rocks, the dirt, sediment, it flows down into different boxes. And so you kind of settle out your gold. And I was sitting here thinking that, cuttings, the formation, although relatively light compared to the fluid that you're drilling with, is very heavy in comparison to about the vast majority of lost circulation material. So one of the things I thought is let's just build something that can separate it based on density. There's various ways to do that, but a sluice box is one of the most efficient ways that I could think of at the time. And so that's what we basically took with us and ran with it, was just building a huge sluice box, albeit a very high-tech sluice box.
Right. You say it's simple, but your website says that you're saving a lot of money per well, actually.
Yeah, we saved, even in our operations, at the time we were drilling verticals in that field, and we were saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, per well. And when you have a well that you have drilling costs of $1.2, $1.5 million for the drilling, if you can shave $200,000 to $300,000 off of that, it's a significant savings. And there were wells where we had even severe losses where the savings were even more. So it's all about percentages. It's all about bottom line. When you turn into a horizontal and you're talking about, typically losses get heavier if you're losing in the zone that you're drilling horizontally into. The savings are even much more. But that was definitely what we saw on average on that field.
Well, and one of the things I think that's lost, especially if you're not in the oil and gas business on a day-to-day basis, is that, most oil and gas companies are smaller, like the company that you came from. they're not huge Exxons or Shells or whatever. So even Exxon and Shell are trying to make money, but a lot of these companies are what we consider quote unquote small businesses. Now their budgets are a lot bigger than a normal small business, but for oil and gas, they're small businesses, and so saving a couple $100,000 per well, that could be the life or death of a company.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, everybody has a different budget. Everybody does want to save money off the bottom line. And I've worked for some big companies, like I said before. Chesapeake, when I was working for them, they were a big company. They were one of the largest drillers, and if they wanted something, they were going to apply the technology to get it. At the end of the day, though, they still had bottom lines too, and they still had obviously AFEs to meet, budgets to meet. They're going to have budgets for the quarter and for the year. And if you can get your well cost down, well, at the end of the day, you're going to get more wells in the ground and hopefully more production with more wells. So everybody has a budget. Everybody wants to trim off. And for us, it not only enabled us to drill in that field and be successful and make profitable wells, but it basically enabled offset operators to have, a chance in that field as well. And we ultimately turned this thing into a commercial unit and went to work for those operators later.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go next, is that in this economy where prices, they've stabled off somewhat, but they're still low, especially for some plays. What has been the market response to your technology?
So that's a good question. Before we got the patent, there was not a whole lot. We built 2 units. One of them we kind of reserved for ourselves just because we were drilling actively. The second unit went commercialized, and a company actually bought the license from us and then took it commercial and started leasing it out. And initially, before the downturn, we had good traction. The patent was technically approved by the U.S. Patent Office in December of 2015. So you could say we came out at probably one of the worst times ever. I was actually
not the best time to come out with that.
No, because I was looking at rig counts again, and I forgot how bad it got. December of 15, the Baker rig count was about 2,000 in the U.S. And 3 months later, by March, it was below 1,000.
Right.
So it tanked hard and it tanked fast. And unfortunately, a lot of the first rigs to lay down are rigs that have heavy losses, the ones who were losing the $150 a barrel of oil-based mud. So the market share got very small in a hurry. Nonetheless, we did a couple jobs in the area for offset operators and had huge success before they ultimately, ceased drilling programs and shut down, just like a lot of other operators did. We didn't shut down ourselves. We ended up moving on to different fields and divesting of that acquisition and doing really well. But I would say we did 2 jobs for offset operators in the next few months, and they had great results. And then since that period in time, after about April 2015, it slowed way down. That was the last commercial job. So we actually did a few commercial jobs before we got the patent, and then it slowed down as the rigs went down. And then things are picking back up, though. Like you mentioned earlier, the price per barrel really isn't picking up. Oil is still hovering around the $50 mark, gas around $3. But people are finding ways around it, and rigs are picking back up. The rig count is climbing back up again. It's looking to climb over 1,000 again. And so things are getting busier, and I would say in the past 3 months, we've had 3 calls from actually major operators, not smaller ones this time around, wanting to put this tank to work. So things are picking up. In fact, we had hands trained to run the units. It typically takes 1 hand just to supervise operations on the unit, and they went to work within the same company who bought the license doing other things. And so we actually had to turn down a few jobs just because we didn't have personnel to run it, because we weren't expecting, the past year and a half has been so stagnant. We were like, okay, now we got to go train personnel again. And since then, we've done that. So I'm excited to see what the future holds, because things are picking back up. Tank appears like it's going to be staying busy, and it's exciting to see where it'll go with the market increasing.
Yeah, and it's weird because in the downturn, what you'll see is some companies will be early adopters to technology, and they can kind of persevere maybe strategically where other companies can't. But what you said was so true, is that you're trying to go in there and save money, and they're looking at it going, well, the only rigs we got running are the ones that are saving us money. And so it's kind of hard to convince someone who's already, kind of in the bind that, well, you're saving money here, I'm going to save you some more. And so we see that in a downturn where companies, even though they might be doing good, they could get some more, new technology or new strategy to save even more money, but they're just so cautious. And I understand why, but they're so cautious that they kind of hamstring themselves, and it kind of, works against them in the long run.
It does. And, we had raised capital to build quite a few of these. Well, I shouldn't say we, the company who bought the license. So the plan was I couldn't build them fast enough at first. We only had 2 units. We had a lapse in drilling. Both units were basically busy, and so we were going to build 10 more. We were going to have 12 units for rental in the U.S. by the end of the year. And then when the downturn came, it's like, okay, well, we're going to stay with 2. We don't need any more than that. And then now that things are picking back up, it's like I've had, just like I said, from major operators, 2 phone calls in the past 3 months. But they don't want one, they want a whole bunch. So like, well, we'll definitely try it for this well. And then if this pilot test works, we want this many units. And that's you'll run into that a lot. The major operators, if they have 10, 20 rigs running in a field, they'll say, okay, I want to try it, but if it works, I want 10 and I want them next month. And
well,
so
hey, hold on, I got to push back there. If you're getting next month kind of notice, that's nice. I usually get like next day, so I'm not gonna feel bad for you for getting next month.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just can't manufacture that fast.
Right. No, I understand. I'm giving you a hard time. Well, look, tell people where they can find you. So if we have drillers that are listening that say, you know what, this might be something that I want to look into, where can they find you and connect with you at?
Yeah, they can get on the website, www.smartdrillingsolutions.com. They can find out more information there. They can fill out the contact page, or they can reach me on my cell direct. The number's on there, and my cell phone is area code 785-764-1629. My email is on there as well, and they can connect with me that way. So I don't believe I've actually set up a Facebook page yet, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's okay. And I'm going to throw out a tip for the listeners. If you want to get in here good with these guys, send them some Kansas Jayhawk swag. They, that might get you put to the front of the pecking order.
Oh, yeah. That'll get you some free rental days there.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much. It was good to talk to you again. We will link to all this information in the show notes so our listeners can go find it there. And good luck to you guys. This sounds like a good product that can save companies money in a downturn. And hey, one of the things we forget about is when oil is $70, $80, $90, $100 a barrel, we need to save money then too. We need to save money so we can put it in the back burner so when we hit that downturn again. So I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.
The Global Energy Leaders podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders podcast, powered by R Squared Global.